Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Wand. I'm the Solution Director for Emerging Markets for Dell, part of the Enterprise Solutions Group. My role is to manage what we call our emerging countries. Now, every organization has different views on what's an emerging country, and I think that our emerging countries is a collection of countries that geographically kind of work for our management purposes. Within our emerging countries, there are differing levels of maturity. So, for example, South Africa is classed from a Dell perspective as an emerging country. Clearly it's not, it's a quite advanced country. But our emerging countries, if you like, come from Russia all the way through Central Eastern Europe, Poland, through the Middle East and down to Africa. So my territory is 104 countries, and when I took this role, I did say to my boss, I don't think I'll be able to cover 104 countries, and he said, well, don't worry, because we put you on a new program, you're actually going to be able to work 26-hour days. So that's how I managed to cover the territory. So I'm now running on lots of cups of coffee and lots of flights. So I want to talk to you today about our observations and our efforts to respond to the needs of our customers in terms of data center efficiency, and the way that consumption in the data center is fundamentally changing, and the decision-making process is certainly evolving to a more converged infrastructure decision point. So before kind of diving into the technology, it's worthwhile just, when I first got this slide deck, there were 109 slides in it. Now, I've cut it down to 105 because I know we haven't got a lot of time. No, seriously, it's not that many. The first 15 slides just talked about what's happening in the industry as far as data production and data storage and analyzing data and security of data. And I could have put hundreds of slides up here about how unstructured data is growing exponentially, and most of that data is never read, and the value of that data needs to be on the right level platform. And I think we all know that because we deal with that day to day. That's part of what we do. So I just want to, I guess, hone in on a couple of, for me, key factors that are always the start point of a conversation whenever I talk to customers. And as I say, I have 104 countries. I talk to lots of customers all the time. The first one is because I tend to talk to both the business operations side of the house as well as the IT operations side of the house. At the business operations side of the house, my first question is always around, is your IT function, does your current IT infrastructure deliver everything that you would desire for a business in order to be as agile as you would like, as competitive as you would like, as performant as you would like? And the answer often is, no, it's not, and that's why we're having this conversation with you. Now, from a industry watcher's perspective, this source is Information Week. They're saying from their analysis, it's only about 29% of all business leaders believe that their IT infrastructure is flexible enough for them to meet the business challenges today and going forward, and they need to do something about that. The challenge, however, is that this is still one of the driving factors around kind of how much money is left available to innovate and drive organizations forward, because existing infrastructure, maintenance of existing infrastructure and expansion of existing infrastructure takes the vast majority of IT budgets. And data is growing like this. Who amongst you here is lucky enough to have an IT budget that's going in the same direction? Nobody's going like this, right? Or in a worst case like this. So now we've got less money, which means we are being challenged to hang on to the technology that we've got for longer, to make do, to try and meet this ever increasing challenge of managing the data. So very little money is left in the budget, ultimately at the end of the day, to invest in new technology. And that again, as I said, the change changing decisions about how we purchase, how we consume IT is driven by certainly this economic factor. And the other challenge that that's driven from here is if you talk to an IT department privately and say, what do you think about the world, and then you talk to the business ops side of the house and you say, well, what do you think about the world? They often don't hold a very high opinion of each other. The IT is saying, well, these guys here are maniacs. They want to deploy new applications in hours. I can't do that. Look at my infrastructure. And on this side of the house, they're saying, I keep giving these guys money and I want to go into this market and they're just holding me up, right? So the challenge there is, we all know, if we've been in this business a long time, kind of reality of actually getting something done without breaking something else is a challenge, okay? And again, some of the industry watchers are saying that 75% of downtime is caused by human error, okay? So in that environment, data is growing really rapidly, faster than we've ever seen it grow. I think this fact is probably out of date now, but this was my favorite dinner party soundbite about kind of the IT industry. And I can't remember who it came from, so I can't credit it to anyone. I think it might have been Forrester Research or something like that. And they said, since the first block of data was ever created, so from the beginning of time, the first block of magnetic data that ever first went down onto a big Winchester disk, which is somewhere in the 1950s, up until 1989, right? So you think from the beginning of time up until 1989. Now, I think when this fact came out, it was saying that amount of data is created every single day. I think now that that came out a year ago, it's probably that amount of data is created twice every day, and it keeps growing. Okay, so data is growing fast. We don't have enough time to maintain it, and we're trying to balance the risk versus reward of deploying new technologies faster and faster to meet the kind of business challenges. So the operational side of the house view of IT is that it's something that needs to be maintained. We keep putting money in, they have to maintain the status quo, that it's very fixed, it's a cost center, it's slow, it's been built up over a period of time, so some of the technology is siloed, it doesn't quite work together. I ask this question everywhere I go. So how many of you here are actually responsible for the data center in your organization? Okay, so if I ask the question, if you had the option where money was absolutely no objective, you could have as much money as you wanted, would you throw everything away and just start from fresh? You would, right? Because what you've built up over time, I bought that from this guy and then I bought that from this guy and they've never quite worked together. Well, why did you make that decision? Well, because at the time, this was the best thing I could get to do this, and then this came out and I need this to do this, but I need that to work with this, right? So it's a continual challenge of kind of this interoperability. So it becomes fragmented, it becomes disconnected, it becomes unpredictable, and all of that drives cost up because the cost is us trying to keep that going and trying to maintain the business and give agility. So, nirvana is over here where the business now sees, and I see this in younger startup organizations, that where IT wasn't just a need to have for the business, it was fundamentally part of the business, part of the service provision. So hosting organizations, for example, would fall into this category. Well, what they need is to be seen as an innovator and a service provider. And if I'm a hoster or an ISP, I make my money on making sure that the technology that I buy and that I deploy that makes me money, and I have to keep the cost out of the business because I'm actually buying infrastructure and renting out. So the difference between the cost and the rent income is my profit margin, right? So the other thing that you hear a lot more these days is elastic. Okay, so if you think about, I started my career back in 85 in the IT industry, and I was very, very early into the networking. So I remember ArcNet and coaxial cable connecting PCs together, right? And when you wanted to get something, you said, right, okay, well, there's the server, and that server will run the database, and there's this server, and that server will run this, and this server will run that, and that server will run that. And you couldn't kind of say, well, I've finished using that server now, I'm just going to redeploy that and use it for something else. It just sat there. And I remember going into a data center Again, I'm quite lucky as in this industry doing the job that I do. I get invited, come and look at our data center. And on the tours, you know, more frequently, kind of around the kind of mid-90s, I go, well, that's our Exchange server, and this is our database server, and that's I can't remember what that one does, and you just move on, and there'd be lots of areas where I don't know what this does anymore, but I don't want to unplug it in case everything breaks, right? But today's environment, you know, it's a 7 by 24 hour globally shrinking business. We need to be nimble and elastic, which means I need to be able to deploy compute resource quickly to complete a project, and then at the end of that project it may not be needed anymore. And what I want to be able to do is to take that back and put it into a central pot and give it to somebody else that needs it. Okay, now that is absolutely doable. We've been able to do that for years, but the time that it takes, the effort that it takes was unrealistic. So what organizations are looking for now, and certainly drives some of our design philosophy and innovation, is we want to be able to provide solutions that can grow, you know, scale, that's not new. Not only scale, retract simply and easily so it can be deployed elsewhere. So this is kind of what we're looking for. The IT services, or sort of service-led IT department rather than a kind of infrastructure-led IT department. And you know, one of the things that we'll talk about a lot is kind of automated, taking out of the business those things you have to do consistently on a day-to-day basis. There's no getting around having to do, like backup, for example. You know, take backup. Probably one of the most common conversations I have. How do you currently back up? Well, we do an incremental tape backup every day. How's that working for you? It's not particularly efficient. And when you do your full backup, well, we do that about once every 2 weeks now. And yeah, how does that work? Well, it's a stress weekend every second weekend, because I start it running about, I don't know, 10:30 on a Friday night, and I have to be back in Sunday afternoon to make sure it's completed, and if not, really early on Monday morning to make sure I've got a consistency point. Okay, so automation, modular, you know, being able to add to without that having the problem of that works. I'm not sure that this works with that. You want to say, oh, that's a module that gives me that compute power, and another module that adds to that to give me bigger compute power. So that's where we're heading. That's what we want to do. Now, so in summary then, what we're looking for is open architecture. That's the basis of everything that Dell has done. We build it on standards. Intel is a big partner of us. They're co-sponsors of this event in terms of our contribution to this event. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides of where their technology is helping us drive and deliver this vision of ours, which is this easy to consume, highly performant, simple to manage, converged infrastructure. Okay, it needs to be intuitive with simple management tools. You know, again, I've been seeing this from a storage perspective, which is my area of expertise, if you like, in terms of most understanding of the compute stack. I have been seeing for a while storage vendors trying to make the storage management more intuitive, so you don't need a storage expert to run it. So a generalist can run the storage. Because we all know, because you know, if you have a great big storage infrastructure, you have to go and send somebody away for weeks and weeks, and they come back with a white coat and a badge, and you know, they look like a professor and they can manage your storage. Well, that's too costly now, right? So you need a kind of a generalist to be able to run it. So this whole idea of making, you know, the infrastructure you consume more intuitive, so a generalist can run that, so it drives cost out of the business, and make it modular, all right? So because I remember having conversations 10 years ago with you know, organizations say, right, you're about to come up to your storage or your server or your data center refresh. Remember that? The data center refresh or the storage refresh. I'm going to run out of storage in about another 6 months, so I've got to decide what I'm going to do for the next 3 years. And you went through the whole, here's why my storage is better than his storage, and let's calculate how much you need. And you came up with this is what I think I need for the next 3 years. And you made a purchasing decision, and you installed, you ripped out what you had, and you installed the new stuff, which was supposed to keep you going for the next 3 years. Now, two things generally happen when you do that. Number one is you get it wrong and you haven't actually bought enough, and then you have to go back to the CFO or the finance organization and say, I know I said I was only going to spend 300,000 and that's all I needed for 3 years, but actually I run out of space. And what happened? Who understands the term wriggly lipped? Maybe this is a British spreadsheet. Let me describe to you. This is a finance director. This is how he looks when you tell him you miscalculated your purchasing amount and you now need some more money. He goes from this, I'm happy finance director, I'm counting money and doing spreadsheets. And you say, I need some more money for my data center infrastructure. This is what happens. Wriggly lipped, right? So remember that expression. This is what happens when you tell a finance director, I didn't get it right and I want some more money, please, right? My wife does a very good version of that as well, I have to say, when I get home. So, what we want then is this ability to consume as we need to consume as we grow, because trying to guess what's going to happen next year, I don't know what's going to happen next week. You can project what's going to happen next year. If you can, then we should hire you, because we need more people to say, yeah, I know what's going to happen in 12 months' time, this. Because it just doesn't, stuff changes. The other thing that I talked about is this idea of automation, just making things easier by automating them, by automating backup, by template-driven provision of compute power. You know, that amount of compute power for that application is the same as I need for that one. Great, let's go, push a button, template, deploy. Okay? And of course, scalable. You have to be able to scale it, but scale it from this modular perspective. Not, yeah, sure you can scale it. Here's another 100,000 worth, because we can no longer afford to consume that way. Right? We have to consume it in smaller chunks, and it has to be simple, it has to be easy to do. And we're looking for, and most of the conversations that I have with IT guys is, there's a lovely American expression, and a lot of sales managers use this with their salespeople. They say, I want one throat to choke. Have you heard that one? It's a horrible expression, right? You sold it to me, you fix it, right? So end to end. So we like being the one throat to choke. So we like saying, yeah, we can go down here from the PC right over here to the data center and beyond into the cloud. So when you do a presentation, this is how you do cloud. Cloud. Got that? Practice that one for hours. So, but at what cost? This isn't about, this is great, love to do that, but you know, how do I make that work from a cost perspective? Well, if you've been in this long enough, you'll remember this kind of legacy system. I asked the other day, and it made me feel really old, if anybody remembers IBM System 360s. Anybody in the room remember 360s? One. Yeah, two, three, four. That's. I'm starting to feel a bit better now. I'm starting to feel better. Now, System 360, if you remember when that came out, it was revolutionary. Here was an IT compute platform that was interoperable with different printers, and it could scale up and do different things. And the 3 decades that came out to market, IBM absolutely dominated. It was brilliant, but it was really expensive, and it was really expensive to maintain. However, it did everything it said on the tin, and people just didn't have a choice. If you haven't read Why Elephants Can't Dance, which is the story of the IBM turnaround by Lou Gerstner, I strongly recommend you read it. It's a fascinating book about the turnaround of IBM. So we know if we spend money on the tin and we spend money on the support, we can probably get the service we want. Many of us then, as this budget, and we had this conversation not 5 minutes ago, we said, what happens is we say, you can't have that, you're going to have to buy commodity systems and put them together yourself. And that's when you end up saying, let's the server. Oh, look, there's some from HP, and there's some from IBM, and there's some from Lenovo, and so you get this kind of mismatched patchwork of servers, because you go out to tender and you buy whatever is the most cost effective at the time, and depending on how much the vendor wants to win there will depend on how much they're prepared to give you off. And you go, great, you get 5 vendors saying, well, this guy's quoting, this guy's quoting, this guy's quoting, who wants it? And it's the salesman that's most desperate for the business who wants to give you the cost, right? So you can do this, but the reality of that, this is probably my wife going wriggly lips. Let me just turn this off, sorry. It was. Right, I'm just going to turn this off, there we go. So, you can get a lower capital cost, but the downstream operational expense, is just incalculable. Costs you more money. There's that old saying, you don't get something for nothing. It's like trying to advise a young sales guy. As a sales manager and a sales coach, you know, I'd have these new sales guys and they'd come in and they go, look at this suit. And they said, oh, it's really nice. How is it? It cost me about £3.50. And I said, you will look like a bag of chips with some string tied around the middle in about a week's time if you spend that much on a suit. No, this is fine. Well, it comes off, they sit in the car. About an hour later, they look like this. Right, they're a tramp off the road. I said, see, you don't get something like it. So you buy an expensive suit and it lasts you 10 times longer than it would if you bought 10 inexpensive suits, right? So, new proprietary systems became a lot cheaper from an operational cost perspective, but again, the capital cost because you had that lock-in got high. So Dell's kind of path has always been, because we base our technology on standards, we've based our kind of history on building up a portfolio of products that are open, affordable and capable. We try wherever possible, and I have to say the vast majority of the time we succeed, to get a reasonable balance between operational cost and CapEx. We're never going to be the cheapest, but we're certainly not the most expensive. But if you look at how we simplify and automate and make it easy to deploy, we are a very, very OpEx performance vendor to partner with. And that's particularly, going back to the last slide, one throat to choke. Those customers that go with us end to end enjoy the benefits of having a single vendor that can do everything for them, and you get economy of scale that way. So, for us, the way forward, how that has kind of manifested itself is in our latest edition, if you like, of compute resource, which we call Active Infrastructure. It has something in it called Active System Manager, and it has a number of systems. In essence, what it is the 4 things you need to make compute resource work. You've got to have a server, you've got to have some networking interconnect, and you need some storage, and then you need some management over the top of that so you can manage it. Whether you're managing virtual servers or whether you're managing physical servers. So you need those 4 things to go together. So what Dell has done is bring out a range of products based on a driving force in the market, which was more and more often now, we have a workload conversation rather than a hardware conversation. It starts in, what are you trying to do? What's the performance that you need? Is there something where we say, oh, we did this for this company, so 5,000 users in an Exchange environment, here is our reference architecture. So it's workload driven. So we've built a range of products aimed at the customer experience, which, as we said, accelerate time to deployment much faster. Okay, it gets past that thing that the operational side of the business said, IT's too slow. Well, you've got to be faster. Okay, maximize the efficiency. It doesn't take lots of people to run it because it's intuitive, it's automated, it's based on standards, and it should ultimately strengthen the level of service that you can provide to the business. So what does it look like? At the top level, in terms of those workloads that are most predominantly discussed and asked for by our customers, are private cloud. Okay, I want to be able to do everything you can do in the cloud, but I don't want to let it outside my building. Can you help me put that together? Yes, we can. Desktop virtualization. Again, this is a slower, smouldering side of the business that I think is going to accelerate very quickly. We've had some tremendous success in showing massive costing savings and also huge improvements in security and work style flexibility with desktop virtualization. Now, again, so if you can say an end-to-end project, or if you don't have a kind of reference architecture, can take you months. And we've managed now to squeeze that down into kind of a matter of weeks in some instances, and we've just finished a project in the Middle East which was from start to finish 6 weeks to deploy 3,000 virtual desktops to make the decision what that infrastructure was going to look like, because we started from a reference point. Well, that's what we did for 2,000, so simple math said that should do 3,000. We did very simple tests, we were able to deploy very quickly. And the third one is those enterprise applications. SAP, some of the Microsoft applications, certainly things like Exchange and databases. And kind of the integration platform, if you like, as I said, is designed to make deployment and management simpler. So workload templates, for example. Here's how much compute power I need to do this. 2 clicks of a mouse to deploy, rather than the process that you would go through that might take you days to hours. Okay, and I'll read everything off the slide, but because this is something that if you go to our website, there's lots and lots of information on this. So what you get then is this is kind of the size and shape of the solution that I'm looking for. All of those things would go to make it up, and then it comes down, ultimately it always comes down to hardware's at the bottom somewhere. And across here, now what we have is this great concept of a pre-integrated, pre-tested, plug-and-play solution that is highly optimized to make sure it's very, very dense in terms of compute power, that is very, very dense in terms of storage capability, that it has very, very high-performant network in it, and it's managed by a single pane of glass. So the idea is rather than go and buy all those components to get to your solution, you get one of these, you need a bigger forklift to get it off the truck. Okay, that's the downside, or 8 men to carry it because it's very heavy. But once you get it in the rack and plug it in, there's very little to do because, again, it's intuitive, it's template-based. And depending on the size, from 50 up to 1,000, and these will continue to grow. And of course, you can link them together to give you the compute power that you need. And they're made up of Dell servers. And just recently, I don't know what happened last year, but something happened to our product development group. They ate something, they read something, I don't know what they did, but they have just been on fire. And as a sales guy, what you want is your product department to deliver you great products to sell, right? So the 12th generation of Dell servers have just been beating the pants off of our competition in so many ways. I'll just give you one example, right? So if you think about, and you'll recognize this, right? So when you plan for a server or a server farm, you've not only got to think about the power that the server takes, right? It's how much is it going to cost me to cool it, right? So that's a big part of it. And the other thing is, how much room is it going to take to deploy? So I want it to be really powerful and really small, right? So the 12th generation servers, again, I don't want to go into every single feature, but the one that I really love is that the majority of our 12th generation servers are fresh air cooled. They don't actually need any air conditioning to run them. And there's lots of examples of that and case studies of that. So, this is made up of, as I say, highly dense, highly performant air-cooled servers, Dell Storage, which falls into 3, at the moment, product categories or naming. The PowerVault, Ecologic, and Compellent. What we'll see over time is it will just become Dell Storage, okay? And that's based on being able to, as I said, scalable, simple to manage, automated, virtualized, and then networking. And we had a fairly good networking portfolio anyway, but we made a recent acquisition of a company called Force 10, who just brought some massive muscle power to our networking portfolio. So the combination of these 3, plus some software companies who've bought some smart management software, when you combine all of those, what you get is Dell, active infrastructure, cost-effective, simple to deploy, highly performant, beautiful-looking, cost-effective compute power. Right, who wants to order one? I've got my order pad here, but that was my So, just giving you some, so early adopters here. I'll give you the full blown-up case study of Indianapolis Airport. It's quite an interesting one. But what you get here in terms of is kind of 3 areas. The innovation around the product. So as I said, here we're saying here is 2.3 times more compute power per rack than our competition. 6 times more bandwidth in the back end from the kind of the networking infrastructure. And 45% better power consumption than many of our competitors that have a converged infrastructure. Okay, from a solution influence, as I said, because it's automated and template-based, it's much faster deployed. We're saying 6 times, that's an average. Sometimes we see it, what would have taken months, we can compress down into days. 99% fewer steps to deploy a complex virtualized cluster. Okay, so I've never had to do that end-to-end, so I'm not a techie, but I know when somebody is trying to do it because this is how most of the techies look. So they're doing something like that. When they do it with us, they're like this. This is with Dell, without Dell. Wriggly lipped, remember that. So if you remember one thing today, just remember wriggly lipped, okay? So what you get from this is something that's, as I say, rapid to deploy, It's very, very efficient, and it is designed from us to allow organizations to strengthen the service delivery capability of their IT department. So what, oh no, hang on, I know. I couldn't take Intel slides and put them into my slide deck because I'm not allowed to cut and paste them. So I've got to change slide decks. Bear with me 1 minute. I'm going to do this without glasses, which is highly dangerous. I don't actually need these glasses. I just wear them to look intelligent. Is it working? Right, so let me just give you a full couple of Intel slides. And I've never presented this before, so bear with me if it's a bit clunky. So Intel has been a long-term, Intel, Microsoft, VMware have been long-term partners of Dell. You know, Intel now and the Dell team kind of develop products together. They're kind of integrated development teams in our development centers around the world. And they appear everywhere. The thing that we talk to customers about from our storage perspective, from Compellent, which is one of our really exciting storage products, is if you pull it apart, which I don't suggest you do, but if you did, what you'd find is it's made up of standard components. The disk drives are whoever makes the best disk drive at the time. They're going to be Seagate, they'll be Hitachi, whoever it is. Okay, the controllers are fairly standard-based servers, and they're based on Intel, which gives us all of our horsepower. Okay, the smart stuff is in the software. So remember I said it needed to be modular. You wanted to base it on open standards. This is a classic example of some technology that's built on open standards from the ground up to do those things that traditional storage systems wouldn't do, which is make them easy to operate. They can expand and retract, simple snapshots, blah, blah, blah. Certainly, if you haven't read about it, you should. Our all-flash array now, we're able to deploy the same amount of power as our nearest competitor in a flash array environment at 80% reduction in cost, because we found the magic formula of how to mix single-cell hard disk drives or flash drives and multi-cell flash drives and a read-write algorithm. So we can get the same power as our competitors would, but at 80% of the cost, because of the way that we design these things. And again, Intel were a big part of that. Obviously, interconnect, Ethernet efficiency is important in that whole overall kind of delivering converged infrastructure. And then again, in our servers. So just from a kind of an example perspective here, we talked about this massive amount of data. And has anybody, the industry watchers came out with this term a little while ago called big data. Have you heard that? Heard that term, big data? Do you know what data is? It's data. There's just more of it. Let's give it a title. I know, big data. Who came up with that? Somebody got paid for that, right? Big data. So there's more and more and more and more and more data available. What organizations need and want to do and ask us to help them with is, how do I now turn that data into insight so I can predict, you know, what I should be doing in terms of deploying resource or designing product or marketing with customers, right? So analyzing data or data analytics now is a very big part of the conversation when we talk about the type of infrastructure we need to deploy. So this is just an example of how, with Dell and Intel working together, we can kind of compress the time and give some efficiency. So again, these numbers come from Intel, so I don't know how I calculated, but the start point was that if you had 10 terabytes of data, a terabyte of data, not 10 terabytes, terabyte with 10 servers, it would take you 4 hours to analyze. That's what we're saying, okay? But with the new Xeon processor, we can reduce the processing by 50%. Okay, get the interconnect or get the hard disk drives right. So rather than have you know, the spinning drives, you have hard disk drives reduced by 80%. Get the interconnect right, so reduction with 10 gigabit Ethernet cards driven by the Intel processor, and integration with Hadoop, which is our software for this. We can take what would have taken 4 hours down to 7 minutes. Now, I'm taking it all of you here are on the IT side of the business, not the business side, right? So if you go for this stuff, what you have to say is not, hey, guess what, boss? That thing that used to take me 4 hours is only now going to take me 7 minutes, because that's just too big a jump to absorb. And then we'll go, really? And what happens? This is what happens, right? I can take what used to take 4 hours and I can now do it in 7 minutes. What you'll get is, why can't you do it in 6 minutes? Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, of course it does, right? So here's what we do. boss, you know what used to take me 4 hours, I can now do it in 2 hours. Well, why can't you do it in 1.5 hours? Well, let me work on that, I'll see if I can. In the meantime, I've just given you a 2-hour lunch break. And then when you go back to boss, they say, you know, I've worked something out, it's going to take me a lot of time and a bit of effort, but I think I can probably get it down to about 1 hour and 45, boss. How does that sound? Whoa, you're a hero. And I've still given you 1 hour and 20 minutes additional lunchtime. So it's all clever stuff. So again, here's another example of our product development team just coming out with some outstandingly good products, right? If you haven't read about this or you haven't seen it, this is what we call our Vertex, right? So this is converged infrastructure consumed in a single unit, okay? So it's made up of blade servers, storage, depending on there's a number of storage options, and networking all ready to go in one, and it's whisper quiet. So if you have customers or you are an organization that has remote offices and you go to that remote office and open the cupboard and you get 3 servers and spaghetti junction and it's overheating and a backup device where the tape's never put in. You remember that? So this is the way to solve that problem. Ready to go, fully integrated compute power in a single, easy to consume source. And I'm just going to quickly go through these because I've had the 10-minute sign over there, and this lady's got a gun like that with a red, you know those red laser dots? I'm going to shoot you if you don't get off. So I'm going to go back to, I'm not going to do this without glasses, my last few slides, my last 48 slides, ladies and gentlemen, so bear with me. So all of that slideware, I don't expect you to believe that. In fact, I challenge you not to believe that. You know, talk to our partners, talk to us, come and see it, have a demonstration, let us show you how good it is. But just to give you a kind of a flavour, that's, you know, somebody talking about this stuff that's not me, it's our customers, okay? So I said I'd unravel the Indianapolis airport for you. So, you know, Indianapolis Airport, it's not the one that kind of immediately rolls off the tongue as a big complex airport. You say, well, maybe Heathrow, Frankfurt, maybe Indianapolis, that's America, isn't it? Right? It is. What makes it interesting is it's the second largest hub for FedEx in the States, and it's got over 10,000 employees. So when I talked about this compression of time and that compression of time saving money, so, you know, as you expect, our data center was too big, we were running out of time, we were taking short lunch hours, it wasn't happening, my wife's gone wriggly lip, all those things existed, and we said, here, have some of this. What do they get out of this, right? Faster, the server deployment time has been reduced from 3 days to less than 1 hour. Now I hope they told the boss I can reduce it from 3 days to 1 day, because then you've got a day off, not just a longer lunch hour, right? Let's hope they did that. But you can see the size of the improvement you can get here. 20% lower OPEX through reduction of administration staff. That doesn't mean they fired anybody. It means people that were doing repetitive tasks that were expensive could then be deployed to do more interesting stuff that drove the business forward. And a smaller data center footprint. This is, you know, if you go into the city of London, everybody's running out of power, out of data center space, out of cooling capability. So when you can say you can do things like take 5 rows of equipment and consolidate it into 3 racks and run it on 10% less power, people sit up and listen. Okay? Talked about that new style of business that the outset has to have that agility to be able to be nimble and elastic. Well, here's an example, okay, of a service provider that provides infrastructure as a service. Again, what they needed was a solution that allowed them to simply through one pane of glass manage the deployment of compute power, and that's what they were able to do with Dell. So, what, 1 minute left? 1 minute or stop? Can't talk anymore. So, very quickly, next step, don't take my word for it, come and have a look at it. Pull it apart, look inside the covers, okay? Have a demonstration, because at the beginning of the demonstration, you'll be like this. Oh, there's one more to show you, right? So, this is, Tony Wand told me that active infrastructure was pretty good. Yeah, you're a salesman, right? This is how it looks after you've seen, right? It really does do that. He was telling the truth. That makes a change. Okay, and then if you want to talk to third-party customers, have executive briefing, we can do that. If you've enjoyed this afternoon, my name's Tony Wand. If you haven't enjoyed this afternoon, my name is Nicholas Lowe. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.